The transport ship descended through Veltara's purple atmosphere, and Hyun-woo watched the alien city grow larger through the viewport. Crystal towers reached toward twin moons, and flying vehicles moved between buildings like schools of fish. Everything looked clean and perfect, nothing like the scarred cities of Earth he remembered from his younger days. "You're very quiet," Ji-won said from the seat beside him. His sister had been on Veltara for 6 months already, working as a xenobiologist. She knew this world better than he did. "Just thinking," Hyun-woo replied. He touched the sealed case on his lap, a simple black container he'd carried from Earth. Ji-won had asked about it twice during the journey. He'd smiled and changed the subject both times. "The Queen is intimidating," Ji-won warned. "She's not cruel, but she doesn't really understand humans yet. To her, we're interesting primitives." "Like smart children?" Hyun-woo nodded. He'd read the reports. The Veltari Empire had ruled this sector for 3,000 years. They had faster ships, better weapons, and technology that seemed like magic. Humanity had only reached the stars 50 years ago. In Veltari eyes, humans were babies taking their first steps. "I can work with that," he said quietly. The palace was even more impressive up close. Gardens floated in the air, held aloft by some force Hyun-woo didn't understand. Guards in silver armor stood at every entrance, tall and elegant, their crystalline skin shifting colors as they watched the humans arrive. Hyun-woo noticed their weapons, their positions, the sight lines between guard posts. Old habits, Queen Aralyn waited in a throne room that could have held 1,000 people. She was beautiful by any species standard, nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that flowed between blue and gold like living metal. Her eyes were completely black, without pupils, and they fixed on Hyun-woo with obvious curiosity. "The human ambassador," she said. Her voice came from everywhere at once, translated by technology Hyun-woo couldn't see. "You are smaller than I expected." "Your Majesty?" Hyun-woo bowed exactly as protocol demanded. "I am honored by your invitation. The Queen smiled, and her skin flashed green with amusement. "Such a diplomatic word for a political marriage. You understand what this is, yes? A symbol. A bond between your young species and my empire." "I understand completely, Your Majesty." "Good." She descended from her throne, moving with impossible grace. She circled Hyun-woo slowly, studying him. "You are calm? Most humans who meet me become nervous. Your heart rate increases, you sweat, you cannot hold eye contact. But you are different." "I've been in stressful situations before, Your Majesty. Have you?" She sounded delighted. "Tell me, Hyun-woo of Earth, what does a human diplomat do that is stressful?" "Mostly paperwork," he said with a small smile. "Very boring paperwork." The Queen laughed, a sound like bells ringing. Several courtiers who had been watching from the shadows joined in. Hyun-woo heard their whispered comments, harmless, simple, no threat at all. Perfect for a symbolic marriage. He kept his expression pleasant and said nothing. The wedding ceremony happened 3 days later. Hyun-woo wore formal earth clothing, simple and dark compared to the flowing crystal garments of the Veltari. Ji-won stood beside him, along with Ambassador Hana, another human who worked in the palace. On the other side, Queen Aralyn was surrounded by dozens of nobles and military commanders. Commander Thaurix, head of the royal guard, watched Hyun-woo throughout the ceremony. His crystalline skin kept flashing red, the Veltari color for suspicion. Hyun-woo met his eyes once and nodded respectfully. The commander looked away first. The ceremony itself was strange but beautiful. The Queen spoke words in her own language that the translators rendered as ancient promises. Hyun-woo repeated vows in English that sounded simple but carried weight. "I will stand beside you. I will protect what you protect. I will not abandon you in darkness." When the Queen took his hand, her skin was warm. She looked down at him, something soft in her black eyes. "You are mine now, little human." "And I am yours. I am honored, my Queen." "You may call me Aralyn when we are alone." "Then you may call me Hyun-woo when we are alone, Aralyn." Her skin flashed gold, pleased. Around them, the courtiers applauded politely. The reception afterward was less pleasant. Hien Wu stood beside the queen, nodding and smiling as hundreds of Veltari nobles approached to offer congratulations. Most were genuinely kind. Some were obviously amused. A few were insulting in ways they thought he wouldn't understand. "A pet human for our queen," one noble murmured to his companion, speaking in what he assumed was private. The translator in Hien Wu's ear caught every word. "How quaint. I wonder if he can be trained to do tricks." One standing nearby stiffened. Hien Wu caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Not worth it, but one noble went too far. Lord Vexler, a military commander from a rival house, approached the queen with wine in his hand and contempt in his voice. "Your Majesty, I must ask, why bind yourself to such a primitive? The humans are barely civilized. They still fight wars on their own planet. They are hairless primitives playing with technology they barely understand." The room went quiet. The queen's skin flashed red, then black, the color of anger. "Lord Vexler, you forget yourself." "I speak only truth, Your Majesty." "This alliance demeans you." Hien Wu's hand moved to the sealed case he'd set beside his chair. His fingers brushed the lock. For just a moment, his expression changed, became something cold and distant. Juwon saw it, and her breath caught. Then Hien Wu smiled, gentle and diplomatic again. "Lord Vexler, I understand your concern. Humans are young compared to the Veltari. We have much to learn from your great civilization." The noble blinked, surprised by the calm response. "At least you know your place, human." "I do," Hien Wu agreed. "I know exactly where I stand." Something in his tone made Vexler pause. The queen glanced at her new husband with curiosity, seeing something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Then the moment passed, and Hien Wu was smiling again, accepting congratulations from the next noble in line. That night, after the reception ended, Aralyn came to Hien Wu's chambers. The palace had given him rooms connected to hers, decorated in what the Veltari thought humans would find comfortable. They tried, but everything was too tall, too elegant, too alien. "You handled Vexler well," she said, watching as Hien Wu carefully placed the sealed case in a cabinet. "Most humans would have been angry." "He's not wrong," Hien Wu said. "Humans are young. We do still have wars. We are learning. But it angered you. I saw something in your face. Brief annoyance, nothing more." "What is in that case?" Aralyn asked. "You have carried it since you arrived. You never open it." "Something from home," Hien Wu said. "A reminder. Of what?" "Of why I became a diplomat instead of something else." Aralyn studied him, her black eyes searching. "You are a strange human, Hien Wu. So calm, so controlled. I find myself curious about you. I hope that's good." "Time will tell." She moved to the door, then paused. "I am glad you are here. Even if this marriage is political, I think we may become friends. I would like that, Aralyn." After she left, Hien Wu stood at the window, looking out at the alien city. Ships moved between towers. Guards patrolled below. He'd memorized 17 guard positions just walking from the ceremony to his chambers. He'd counted security cameras, identified choke points, noted which corridors had multiple exits. Old habits diehard.G-1 appeared in his doorway, shaking her head. "You scared me today. That look you had when Vexler insulted us. I'm fine, Juwon. What's really in the case?" "A reminder," he repeated. "Of who I used to be and who I'm trying not to be anymore?" She didn't ask again. She'd been too young to remember the worst years, the wars that nearly destroyed Earth before humanity finally united. But she knew Hien Wu had been a soldier once. She knew he didn't like talking about it. What she didn't know was that her brother had been more than just a soldier. Much more. Hien Wu locked the cabinet and went to bed. Tomorrow he would begin learning everything about palace security, about Veltari military tactics, about this empire that had welcomed humanity, with one hand while holding weapons in the other, just in case the peace didn't last. 3 months passed, and Hien Wu settled into palace life like he'd been born to it. He attended state dinners and smiled at ambassadors. He stood beside the queen during court sessions and never interrupted. He walked in the gardens and read in the library. and seemed perfectly content with his quiet role. The palace staff started calling him the gentle consort behind his back. Some meant it kindly. Others said it with barely hidden mockery. Aralyn found herself enjoying his company more than she'd expected. Unlike her advisors who constantly wanted her attention, Hyun-woo was comfortable with silence. They would sit together in the evenings, her reviewing reports while he read books about Veltari history, and neither felt the need to fill the quiet with empty words. "You're reading about the War of Six Kingdoms," she noted one evening, glancing at his screen. "It was a fascinating conflict," Hyun-woo said. "The way General Velthorn used the canyon networks to trap the enemy fleet. Very clever. You understand military strategy?" "I find it interesting. History is often decided by battles, even if we wish it weren't." Aralyn's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple. "Most diplomats I know avoid military topics. They find them distasteful." "War is distasteful," Hyun-woo agreed. "But pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make it go away." She studied him, seeing something in his expression she couldn't quite read. "Sometimes I think there is more to you than you show, Hyun-woo. Everyone has depths, Aralyn. Even humans." Before she could respond, Commander Thalrix entered with urgent news. There had been another border incident with the Drex Collective. 3 Veltari outposts had gone silent. When scouts arrived, they found the stations destroyed and the crews dead. "The Drex are testing us," Thalrix said, his skin flashing angry red. "They want to see if we will respond with force." "How many attacks is that this month?" Aralyn asked. 7, Your Majesty. "Small targets, but the pattern is clear. They are preparing for something larger." Hyun-woo listened quietly, his expression neutral. But Aralyn noticed his fingers tapping slowly on his chair arm. Not nervously, but rhythmically, like he was counting something. "What do your military advisors recommend?" she asked the Lurix. "Admiral Tyrshan suggests we reinforce the border stations and increase patrol frequency. Show strength without committing to open war. And you agree?" "I do, Your Majesty." Aralyn glanced at Hyun-woo. "Do you have thoughts, husband?" Every eye in the room turned to him. Several advisors looked amused that the Queen would ask her human consort about military matters. Thalrix's skin flashed irritated orange. Hyun-woo met Aralyn's gaze. "I am not a military commander, my Queen, but if I may observe, reinforcing fixed positions against an enemy testing your responses seems predictable." "Predictable how?" Thalrix demanded. "If I were planning an attack, I would want to know exactly where your forces were positioned. I would probe until you revealed your defensive strategy. Then I would know exactly where not to attack when the real offensive began." The room fell silent. Aralyn's skin shifted to surprised gold. Thalrix looked like he'd bitten into something sour. "An interesting perspective," Admiral Tyrshan said from across the room, his tone making it clear he thought otherwise. "But the Drex are not subtle tacticians. They attack with overwhelming force. Our defensive positions are more than adequate." "Of course," Hyun-woo said with a small smile. "I'm sure you know better than I do." But Aralyn saw Thalrix watching Hyun-woo with new suspicion, and she saw Hyun-woo return to his quiet observation, fingers still tapping that strange rhythm on the chair. The next morning, Aralyn woke early and found Hyun-woo's side of the bed already empty. She'd noticed this before. He was always awake before dawn, disappearing for hours. She'd assumed he was homesick, perhaps walking in the gardens or communicating with Earth. Curious, she followed the tracker built into his palace bracelet. It led her to one of the training courtyards on the palace's lower levels, an area rarely used except by off-duty guards. What she found made her stop in the doorway. Staring, Hyun-woo moved through a combat drill with fluid precision. No weapon in his hands, just his body, but every movement was controlled and deadly. A young Veltari guard named Kale practiced with him, trying to match his movements and failing. "Your stance is too wide," Hyun-woo said calmly. "You're stable, but you can't move quickly. In real combat, being stuck in one position gets you killed." But the Royal Guard teaches this stance," Kale protested. "The Royal Guard hasn't fought a real war in 300 years. Haiyan Wu replied. Your techniques are beautiful, but they're designed for ceremony. Try again. Feet closer together. Weight forward. Good. Now when I attack, don't try to block. Move aside and counterattack where I'm vulnerable. Aurelin watched for 20 minutes. Her gentle, quiet husband moved like violence itself. When Kale finally landed a hit, Haiyan Wu smiled, genuine and warm. Excellent. You're learning fast. Thank you, Lord Haiyan Wu. Will you teach me more tomorrow? Same time. And don't call me Lord, just Haiyan Wu. After Kale left, Aurelin stepped into the courtyard. Haiyan Wu looked up, not surprised. You followed me? You're full of surprises, husband. Where did a diplomat learn to fight like that? Earth, he said simply. Everyone learns self-defense. That was not self-defense. That was military training. Advanced military training. Haiyan Wu picked up a towel and wiped his face. I was a soldier before I became a diplomat. I thought you knew that. Your file said you served in Earth's diplomatic corps for 12 years. Before that I served elsewhere. Where? Places I try not to think about anymore. He met her eyes, and for just a moment she saw something ancient and tired in his expression. I became a diplomat because I was tired of fighting, Aurelin. I wanted to help build peace instead of winning wars. But you still train every morning. Old habits, he said quietly. And it keeps me healthy. Nothing sinister. Aurelin wanted to ask more, but something in his face made her stop. There were walls inside Haiyan Wu, carefully constructed, and she realized that pushing too hard might damage the growing trust between them. Kale respects you, she said instead. He's a good student. Your guards are skilled, but they're trained for show more than substance. If real fighting comes, they'll need different techniques. You think real fighting will come? Haiyan Wu looked at her seriously. The Dreks are probing your defenses. That's what you do before an invasion. Yes, I think fighting will come. That afternoon, Ambassador Kelson of the Dreks Collective arrived for scheduled trade negotiations. He was tall even by Veltari standards, with dark purple skin and eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. The negotiations took place in the Grand Hall, with Aurelin presiding and dozens of advisors present. Haiyan Wu attended. Sitting quietly to the side as usual, Kelson was charming and reasonable. He discussed trade routes and mining rights and made jokes that made everyone laugh. But Haiyan Wu noticed how his eyes constantly moved, cataloging exits, counting guards, observing palace layout. During a break in negotiations, Kelson approached Haiyan Wu with wine and a smile. The famous human consort. I have heard much about you. Nothing too terrible, I hope, Haiyan Wu replied pleasantly. On the contrary. I hear you are intelligent, cultured, and devoted to our queen. Tell me, how do you find palace life? Peaceful, yes, peace is wonderful. Kelson's smile didn't reach his eyes. I only hope it lasts. Your species is so young, so fragile. It would be tragic if you became caught up in the conflicts of older, stronger civilizations. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Merely an observation. Humans have only been in space for 50 years. Nothing of real galactic warfare. The weapons, the tactics, the sheer scale of conflict. If war came to this sector, humanity would be swept aside like dust. Haiyan Wu sipped his wine calmly. Perhaps you're right. We are young. We have much to learn, a wise response. Kelson patted his shoulder condescendingly. Stay close to your queen, little human. When the storms come, you will need her protection. After Kelson left, Ji-won appeared beside Haiyan Wu. That was threatening. Yes, you're not worried? Extremely worried. But showing it would only encourage him. That night, Haiyan Wu couldn't sleep. He stood in his study, surrounded by screens showing news from the border. More Drek ships massing. More provocations. The pattern was clear to anyone who'd studied military strategy. Aurelin found him there at midnight. Tactical maps spread across every surface. You should sleep, she said. So should you. She moved closer, looking at his screens. Ship positions. Supply routes. Attack patterns. You really do understand military matters. I understand when someone is preparing to start a war, yes. And you think the Drex will attack us? I think they're already attacking you. They're just doing it slowly, testing your responses, learning your weaknesses. When they have enough information, they'll strike hard. Aralin's skin shifted to worried blue. My advisors think I'm being paranoid. They say the Drex wouldn't dare attack a power like the Veltari Empire. Your advisors have never fought a war, Hyun-woo said quietly. They don't recognize the signs because they've never seen them before. But you have. Who were you really before you became a diplomat? She asked softly. Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the cabinet where he kept the sealed case. He touched it but didn't open it. The attacks escalated over the next month. Not border skirmishes anymore, but coordinated strikes on Veltari colonies. Entire settlements went dark. When rescue teams arrived, they found buildings burned and populations missing. The Drex were taking prisoners now, sending a clear message. Aralyn convened her war council daily. Admiral Tyrshan presented reports with growing frustration. Commander Thalrix argued for immediate military response. The civilian advisors counseled patience and diplomacy. Everyone talked in circles while the casualty lists grew longer. Hyun-woo attended every meeting but rarely spoke. He listened, watched, and occasionally made notes on his personal tablet. Most of the council had stopped noticing him. He was just part of the furniture, the Queen's quiet human husband who didn't understand real warfare. Then Earth sent a delegation, and everything changed. The human ship arrived without fanfare. A blocky military transport that looked crude next to elegant Veltari vessels. Captain Dae-hyun led the group, accompanied by a dozen personnel in plain gray uniforms. He was older than Hyun-woo, scarred and serious, with eyes that had seen terrible things. Aralyn welcomed them formally, expecting the usual diplomatic pleasantries. Instead, Dae-hyun walked straight past her and stopped in front of Hyun-woo. He brought his fist to his chest in a sharp military salute. "Commander," Dae-hyun said. "Good to see you again, sir." The throne room went completely silent. Every Veltari stared at Hyun-woo, who had gone very still. "Captain Dae-hyun?" Hyun-woo replied quietly. "I'm not a commander anymore. Just a diplomat." "Once a commander, always a commander," Dae-hyun said with a slight smile. "Especially for those of us who served with you. We still tell stories about Seoul. Ancient history. 5 years isn't that ancient." Aralyn's skin flashed confused purple. "Someone explain what is happening." "Commander? Seoul?" Dae-hyun looked at Hyun-woo, waiting for permission. Hyun-woo closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. "Your Majesty," Dae-hyun said, turning to the Queen. "You asked Earth to send military observers to assess the Drex threat. Earth complied. But I should clarify something about Ambassador Hyun-woo's background. Before he joined the diplomatic corps, he was Commander Hyun-woo, Special Operations Group 7. He led covert operations during the Human Unification Wars. The what wars? Admiral Tyrshan demanded. Earth's last major conflicts, Dae-hyun explained. Before humanity unified under one government, we were divided into hundreds of nations. We fought each other for resources, territory, ideology. It was brutal. Millions died. Commander Hyun-woo's unit specialized in urban warfare, hostage rescue, and impossible situations. The Seoul offensive was considered his masterpiece. E1, standing at the edge of the room, had gone pale. She'd known her brother had been a soldier, but not this. Not a commander of special forces. Not someone with a reputation that made hardened military captains salute. "How many operations did you lead?" Aralyn asked Hyun-woo, her voice carefully controlled. "I don't remember the exact number," he said quietly. "We didn't keep score. We just did what was necessary." "More than 200 confirmed missions," Dae-hyun supplied. 80% success rate in situations where success was considered unlikely. He retired after Seoul and spent 3 years in psychological counseling before entering diplomatic service. Earth's government agreed he was too valuable to waste, so they trained him as an ambassador. But we've always known that if the situation became desperate enough, Commander Hyun-woo would remember his training. And you think this situation is desperate enough? Thalrix asked. I think the Drex are preparing for full-scale invasion, Daehyun said bluntly. I think your defensive strategies are inadequate, and I think you need someone who understands how to fight when you're outnumbered and outgunned, because that's exactly what's coming. The council erupted into argument. Some advisors were insulted by the humans' assessment. Others were intrigued. Admiral Tyreshen looked furious that a primitive species dared critique Veltari military doctrine. Hyun Woo sat through it all, silent and still until Aurelin called for order. Enough, she said firmly. Hyun Woo, I want the truth. All of it. What were you really doing before you came here? He met her eyes, and she saw in them a weariness that seemed to span decades. I was fighting a war that nearly destroyed my species, Aurelin. I was leading soldiers into situations where most of them wouldn't come home. I was making decisions that saved thousands of lives but cost hundreds of others. And when it finally ended, when humanity finally stopped tearing itself apart, I swore I would never fight again. I became a diplomat because I wanted to prevent wars, not win them. But you can fight if necessary. Yes, and you've been preparing for this since you arrived, haven't you? The training. The observations. The questions about military history. Old habits, he admitted. I couldn't stop myself from analyzing palace security and defensive positions. It's how my mind works. I see a building and I think about how to defend it or how to take it. I see guards and I calculate their response times. I can't turn it off. Auralin's skin shifted through several colors processing this information. Finally, she turned to Daehyun. What did Earth send you here to do? Officially observe and report. Unofficially, assess whether the Veltari Empire can survive what's coming. And if Commander Hyun Woo needs support, we're authorized to provide it. Support for what? For keeping you alive, Your Majesty? That night, alone in their chambers, Aurelin confronted Hyun Woo properly. You lied to me. By omission, but still a lie. I never lied, he said quietly. I told you I was a soldier before becoming a diplomat. I told you I'd seen combat. You didn't ask for details, because I thought you were a regular soldier, not a special operations commander with a legendary reputation. Would it have changed anything? Would you have rejected the marriage if you'd known? She was quiet for a moment. No, but I would have understood you better. The way you move. The way you watch everything. The way you can't relax even when you're supposed to be at peace. I'm sorry, Hyun-woo said. I wanted to be someone different here. Someone gentle and harmless. I wanted to build something instead of destroy things. But the universe doesn't always let us choose who we need to be. Aurelin touched his face. Show me. Show you what? What you've been hiding in that case. I need to see all of you, Hyun-woo. Not just the diplomat. Not just the gentle husband, everything. He hesitated, then walked to the cabinet. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in dark cloth, was a sword, not a ceremonial blade. Not a display piece. This was a weapon that had been used, maintained, and carried through actual combat. The blade was dark metal, almost black, with a simple handle wrapped in worn leather. There were scratches along its length, marks from impacts and hard use. This is from Seoul? Aurelin asked. And before? I've carried it through a dozen conflicts. When technology fails, when ammunition runs out, when everything goes wrong, this still works. It saved my life more times than I can count. And you've carried it here, to my palace, for months without telling anyone? I prayed I would never need it again, Hyun-woo said. I hoped I could leave it in this case forever and die an old man who'd forgotten how to use it. But I can feel what's coming, Aurelin. The Drex aren't going to stop. They're going to push until you push back, and when that happens, people I care about will be in danger. You'll be in danger, so you'll fight again, if I have to. She studied the sword, then looked at her husband. I need you to be honest with me from now on. About everything. Can you do that? Yes, then tell me what you really think is going to happen. Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment, organizing his thoughts. The Drex will strike at the heart of your empire. Not the borders. Not the colonies. They'll come here, to Veltara to kill or capture you. They've been gathering intelligence for months. They know your guard rotations, your defensive positions, your response protocols. Ambassador Kelson wasn't here for trade negotiations. He was here to scout the palace. You're certain? I would bet my life on it. Which I am by staying here beside you. What do we do? Let me coordinate palace security. Let me train your guards properly. And when Daehyun offers Earth military support, accept it. Pride won't matter if you're dead. Aralin's skin flashed worried blue, but she nodded. Very well. Tomorrow I'll make the announcement. You'll work with Thalrix to improve palace defenses. He won't like taking orders from a human. Then he'll learn to adapt. You're not just a human anymore, Hyunwoo. You're my consort and my protector. If anyone has a problem with that, they can discuss it with me. The next morning, Aralin made it official. Hyunwoo was given authority over palace security, with Thalrix reporting to him. The announcement caused exactly the scandal Hyunwoo expected. Half the nobles were outraged. The military commanders felt insulted. Only Daehyun and the human delegation looked satisfied. Thalrix took it better than expected. He approached Hyunwoo privately after the announcement. I do not like this human. But the queen has spoken, and I serve the queen. If you have expertise, I will listen. I appreciate that, Commander. I know this isn't easy. Show me what you see that I don't, Thalrix demanded. Explain why our defenses are inadequate. Hyunwoo pulled up a holographic display of the palace. Your guards are positioned to look impressive. The alarm started at dawn. Hyunwoo was already awake, dressed, and reviewing defensive positions when the first alerts came through. The Drex fleet had bypassed the outer system defenses using some kind of stealth technology. By the time Veltari sensors detected them, the enemy was already in orbit. How did they get through? Admiral Tyrshin demanded, his skin flashing panic yellow on the command center screens. They've been planning this for months, Hyunwoo said calmly. They studied your sensor networks. They found the blind spots. This isn't improvisation. This is execution of a perfect plan. Aralin stood at the center of the command room, surrounded by advisors who were all speaking at once. She raised her hand for silence and looked at Hyunwoo. How long do we have? Ground forces will land within the hour. The palace will be their primary target. They'll try to kill or capture you to break Veltari resistance. The fleet is already engaged with Admiral Tyrshin's forces. But that's a distraction. The real threat is coming here. As if responding to his words, the palace shuddered. Explosions bloomed across the city as Drex drop ships began their assault. Through the windows, Hyunwoo could see enemy craft descending through smoke and fire. Commander Thalrix, Hyunwoo said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Execute Protocol 7. Get the Queen to the throne room and establish the inner perimeter. Move. Thalrix hesitated for only a second, then began barking orders. The guards responded instantly, their new training taking over. They moved with purpose now, not ceremony. Within minutes, the palace had transformed into a fortress. Daehyun appeared with the human security team, fully armed. Sir, we're ready. Good, take positions at the secondary corridors. Let them think they're succeeding until they reach the kill zones. Understood. One ran into the command center, followed by Ambassador Hannah. The civilian staff are evacuating through the underground tunnels. Most should reach the shelters in 30 minutes. Good work, Hyunwoo said. You two need to go with them. No, Ji-won said firmly. You'll need medical support. Hannah and I are staying. He looked at his sister, saw the determination in her eyes, and nodded. There was no time to argue. Stay in the inner chamber with the Queen. Don't leave unless Thalrix or I personally tell you to. The first Drex forces hit the palace outer walls within 20 minutes. They came fast and hard, elite commandos in powered armor that made them nearly unstoppable. They breached the perimeter in 3 locations simultaneously, exactly as Hyunwoo had predicted, but they found the palace defended by soldiers who no longer fought like ceremonial guards. The Veltari forces used human tactics now, ambush, crossfire, controlled retreats that led enemies into prepared kill zones. The Drex advanced, but they paid for every meter. Haiyan Wu monitored the battle from multiple screens, directing forces with calm precision. East Quarter Team, fall back to Checkpoint 3. West Team, hold position but prepare to collapse the approach tunnel on my signal. South Entrance, they're going to breach in 30 seconds, explosives ready. Aurelin watched him work and saw a different person. This wasn't her gentle husband. This was Commander Haiyan Wu, a man who'd fought in wars that would have destroyed most species. He moved between screens, issued orders, and adjusted tactics with the ease of someone conducting an orchestra. "They're pushing toward the throne room," Thalrix reported, his voice tight with stress. "We've stopped 2 assault teams, but a third has broken through. They'll reach this level in minutes." "Then it's time," Haiyan Wu said quietly. He turned to Aurelin. "Stay here. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't move from this position." "Haiyan Wu, please, Aurelin. Let me do what I'm trained to do." He walked to where he'd placed the sealed case that morning, knowing this moment would come. The lock clicked open. He drew the sword, and the dark blade seemed to absorb the emergency lighting. The remaining palace guards stared. They'd trained with Haiyan Wu for weeks, but most had never seen him with his weapon. There was something in the way he held it, the way his entire body language changed, that made even Thalrix step back instinctively. "If they reach this room, they die," Haiyan Wu said simply. "All of them. No mercy, no prisoners." "Understood?" "Understood," Thalrix replied. The doors exploded inward. Drex commandos poured through, their armor making them look like monsters from Nightmare. They were larger than Veltari, heavily armed, and moved with the confidence of soldiers who'd never lost a battle. They'd never fought. Humans before Haiyan Wu moved forward to meet them. The first Drex aimed a weapon at him, probably planning to stun rather than kill the primitive human. Haiyan Wu's sword took his arm off at the elbow in one clean strike. Before the commando could scream, the blade reversed and took his head. The throne room became a slaughterhouse. Haiyan Wu fought with a brutality that shocked everyone watching. His movements were efficient, economical, and absolutely merciless. He used the Drex armor against them, striking at joints and weak points with precision born from experience. When his sword couldn't penetrate, he used their own weapons, taking them from dead hands, and turning them on their former owners. The human security team supported him with devastating effect. They'd fought together before, knew each other's patterns. Haiyan moved like he was reading Haiyan Wu's mind, covering blind spots and eliminating threats the instant they appeared. The Veltari guards, inspired by the humans' ferocity, found courage they didn't know they had. They stopped thinking about honor and ceremony and started thinking about survival. They fought dirty, used the environment, and took every advantage. Thalrix himself took down 3 Drex soldiers, his skin flashing battle red. Aurelin watched her husband move through the enemy like death itself. She saw him take hits that should have killed him and keep fighting. She saw him protect wounded guards, drag them to safety, then return to the battle without hesitation. And she saw in his eyes something ancient and terrible, a human who'd learned to be a killer and was very good at it. The second wave hit before the first was finished. Then a third wave. The Drex kept coming, throwing soldiers at the throne room like they had an unlimited supply. Bodies piled up in the corridors. The floor became slick with blood from a dozen different species, but they didn't break through. "They're committing everything to this attack," Haiyan said, reloading his weapon. "This is their main assault." "Good," Haiyan Wu replied, his voice hard. "Let them waste resources here while Admiral Tyrshan tears apart their fleet." "You planned this," Aurelin realized. "You wanted them to attack the palace." "I made it the obvious target," Haiyan Wu admitted. "I knew they'd come for you. So I prepared the perfect killing ground. Every soldier they send here is one less attacking our defensive positions. Every minute they waste trying to reach this room is another minute for our fleet to gain advantage. But we could die here." "No," he said firmly. "I won't let that happen." The Drex assault leader finally appeared, a massive warrior in command armor who towered over everyone. He carried a blade of his own, some kind of energy weapon that hummed with power. He looked at Hyan Wu with something like respect. "The human," the Drex leader said, his voice translated by universal systems. "They said you were harmless. A diplomat. A pet. They were wrong. People often underestimate humans," Hyan Wu replied. "It's usually the last mistake they make." They fought in the center of the throne room while everyone else seemed to freeze, watching the duel. The Drex was stronger, his reach longer, his armor better. But Hyan Wu was faster, more experienced, and fighting for someone he loved. The battle lasted 3 minutes that felt like hours. Hyan Wu's sword found gaps in the armor, drawing blood from a dozen small cuts. The Drex leader's blade came within inches of Hyan Wu's head multiple times. They moved in a deadly dance, neither giving ground. Then Hyan Wu saw his opening. The Drex overextended on a strike, and Hyan Wu moved inside his guard. The dark sword punched through a joint in the armor, straight into the warrior's chest. The Drex leader looked down in surprise, then at Hyan Wu's face. "How?" he gasped. "Because I've been fighting wars since before you were born," Hyan Wu said quietly. "And I'm very tired of losing people I care about." The Drex leader fell. His death broke something in the enemy forces. They'd thrown everything at this assault, committed their best troops, and still the human had killed their commander. The remaining Drex began to retreat, pulling back in disarray. Thaurix wanted to pursue, but Hyan Wu stopped him. "Let them go. Secure the perimeter and treat the wounded. We've won this battle, but the war isn't over." As the adrenaline faded, Hyan Wu felt every injury he'd ignored during the fighting. His left arm was burned from a near-miss energy weapon. His ribs hurt where armor had caught him. Cuts covered his arms and face. But he stayed standing until the last enemy soldier had left the palace. Only then did he let himself kneel. Exhausted, Aurelin rushed to him, her hands gentle on his face. "You're hurt. I've been worse. You could have died. But I didn't. And neither did you. That's all that matters." She looked at the sword still in his hand, the blade dark with blood. "This is who you really are. Not the diplomat. Not the gentle consort. This—" The message from the Drex Collective arrived 3 days after the palace battle. It appeared on every communication channel simultaneously, impossible to block or ignore. Overlord Drexmar himself delivered the ultimatum, his image projected across the empire. "People of the Veltari Empire," he began, his voice cold and absolute. "Your resistance is futile. Your fleet is damaged. Your defenses are breached. Surrender your queen to us within 1 standard week, or we will reduce Veltara to ash. Every city, every settlement, every living thing. Choose wisely." The transmission ended, leaving silence in the command center. Admiral Tyrshan spoke first, his voice defeated. "Your Majesty, I must counsel surrender. We lost 40% of our fleet in the battle. The enemy still has overwhelming numbers. If they concentrate all forces on Veltara, we cannot stop them." Other advisors agreed. The mathematics were simple and brutal. The Drex could destroy the planet before help could arrive. Surrendering the queen might save billions of lives. Aurelin stood at the window, looking out at her city. Repair crews worked on damaged buildings. Medical teams tended to wounded. Life continued, fragile and precious. She could sacrifice herself to save them. It would be the noble choice? The expected choice? "No," Hyan Wu said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He stood beside the tactical display, still wearing bandages from the palace battle. His sword rested against the table, close at hand. "Surrendering won't save anyone," he continued. "The Drex don't want a hostage. They want to break your spirit. If the queen surrenders, they'll execute her publicly and then attack anyway. Showing weakness to a predator species never ends well." "And your alternative?" Admiral Tyrshan asked, his tone making it clear he expected no good answer. "We fight. We cannot win." "We can't win alone," Hyan Wu agreed. "But we're not alone anymore." He pulled up a star chart. "I contacted Earth the day the Drex fleet arrived. I didn't ask permission because there was no time. I sent a priority military distress signal using codes I swore I'd never use again. Earth is responding." "With what?" Dalrix demanded. A few dozen ships? The Drex have hundreds. Earth is sending the Third Fleet, Hyun-woo said. 120 ships. All combat veterans from the Unification Wars. They're commanded by Admiral Kong, who fought in the same campaigns I did. They'll arrive in 4 days. Human ships are inferior to Veltari vessels, Tyrshin protested, and far inferior to Drex warships. Adding them to our fleet will not change the mathematics enough. Hyun-woo smiled, and there was something predatory in it. You're thinking about this wrong. You're thinking like a civilization that's been at peace for centuries. The Drex are thinking like warriors. But humans? We're thinking like survivors? We don't fight fair. We don't fight clean. We fight to win, whatever it takes. The human fleet arrived ahead of schedule. The ships looked rough compared to Veltari elegance or Drex power. They were blocky, heavily armored, and covered in weapons. They'd been built during humanity's darkest period. Designed for one purpose, to kill other humans as efficiently as possible. Admiral Kong was an older woman with gray hair and scars on her face from some long-ago battle. She materialized on the command center screen and immediately focused on Hyun-woo. Commander, she said with obvious relief. Good to see you alive. We received your distress call and came as fast as possible. Thank you, Admiral. But I'm not a commander anymore. The hell you're not. Earth reactivated your commission the moment we received your signal. You're now officially Special Operations Commander Hyun-woo, with full authority to coordinate joint, human Veltari military operations. Congratulations, you're back in the war business. Hyun-woo closed his eyes briefly. He'd hoped to never hear those words again. Beside him, Aurelin touched his hand gently. Understood, Admiral, he said quietly. What's our situation? We brought the Third Fleet plus General Seo Jun with 10,000 ground troops. The ground force includes veterans from the Arctic campaigns. If you need someone to take and hold territory against superior numbers, these are the people. The Drex will attack in 3 days, Hyun-woo said. They're giving us time to panic and make mistakes. Standard psychological warfare. Then we have 3 days to prepare something they won't expect, Admiral Kong replied. What are you thinking? Over the next 72 hours, Hyun-woo worked with both human and Veltari command staff to develop a strategy. Admiral Tyrshin was skeptical at first, but as the plan came together, even he had to admit it was brilliant. The key was understanding how each species thought about warfare. The Veltari fought with elegant precision, using superior technology to win decisive battles. The Drex fought with overwhelming force, throwing resources at problems until they broke. But humans fought dirty. We're going to make them think they're winning, Hyun-woo explained to the combined command staff. We'll pull back our best ships and position our damaged vessels in obvious defensive formations. The Drex will see what they expect, a broken enemy preparing a desperate last stand. And while they focus on the obvious target, General Seo Jun asked, our real strength hits them where they're vulnerable. Their supply lines, their command structure, their communication networks. We won't fight them head-on. We'll make them bleed from 1,000 cuts until they're too weak to maintain the offensive. A human medical officer who'd arrived with the fleet set up field hospitals in the palace. She'd served under Hyun-woo during the Seoul offensive and knew exactly how brutal his tactics could be. Commander, if you're planning what I think you're planning, we're going to need a lot more medical supplies. Order everything you can. Biora, this is going to get worse before it gets better. The night before the battle, Hyun-woo found Aurelin in their chambers. She was supposed to evacuate to a secure bunker, but she'd refused. If her people were going to die defending the Empire, she would be among them. I'm staying on the command ship, she said before he could argue. I'm the Queen. My place is with my fleet. The command ship will be a primary target. Then you'll protect me. Like you always do? He couldn't argue with that logic. Instead, he held her close, breathing in her scent, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. Tomorrow they might both die, but tonight they were together. I love you, he said quietly. I need you to know that. Whatever happens tomorrow, I love you. I know, she replied. I love you too. Both versions of you, the gentle diplomat and the warrior. You're not just one or the other. You're both, and that's what makes you extraordinary. The Drex fleet arrived exactly when expected. 200 ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, a show of overwhelming force meant to terrify their enemy. They saw the Veltari fleet positioned defensively around the planet, damaged ships placed in obvious locations. They saw exactly what they expected to see. They didn't see the human ships hiding in the sensor shadow of Veltara's moons. They didn't see the strike teams preparing to board their supply vessels. They didn't see Commander Hyun Woo watching from the command ship, his sword resting against his chair. His expression cold and calculating. All ships, Admiral Kong's voice came through communications. Execute Operation Ghost Storm. The human fleet erupted from concealment like predators ambushing prey. They didn't target the main Drex battle line. Instead, they hit the supply ships, the troop transports, the command vessels coordinating the assault. Within minutes, the Drex formation fell into chaos as their rear lines exploded at the same time. Human boarding parties teleported directly onto Drex vessels using technology borrowed from Veltari allies. These weren't soldiers trained for elegant combat. These were veterans of urban warfare who'd learned to fight in ruined cities where every building was a potential death trap. They moved through Drex ships like ghosts, sabotaging systems and eliminating crews with brutal efficiency. General S.O. Jun led one boarding party personally. She was older than most of her soldiers, gray-haired and scarred, but she moved through combat with deadly grace. Her team hit the Drex flagship itself, fighting their way toward the command center. On the main battlefield, the Veltari fleet stopped pretending to be helpless. Admiral Tyreshin had learned from humanity's example. His ships used tactics the Drex had never seen before, false retreats that led enemies into traps, coordinated strikes on single targets, kamikaze runs by damaged vessels to take out larger ships. The mathematics changed. Suddenly, the Drex advantage didn't seem so overwhelming. Overlord Drexmar watched his perfect assault fall apart and finally understood his mistake. He prepared to fight the Veltari Empire. He'd studied their tactics, countered their technology, and planned for their elegant warfare, but he hadn't prepared to fight humans. He'd dismissed them as primitives, ignored their military history, and underestimated what a species that nearly destroyed itself could do to others. All forces, concentrate on the human vessels, he ordered. Kill them first. But it was too late. General Seo Chun's team had reached the flagship's command center. They blew through the doors with explosive charges and poured inside. The fighting was close and brutal. Drex security forces were well trained, but they'd never faced opponents who fought like cornered animals. The humans used every advantage, every dirty trick, every lesson learned from decades of brutal conflict.